Your unique story, our global audience. Global One Media.
Hello, and welcome to Global One Media's series of podcasts with key figures from the industry to help you understand the recent news to make informed and intelligent investment decisions. I am Munir Barazi, your business analyst and host, and today I am very excited to welcome Natalie Brunell. Natalie hosts her own podcast called Coin Stories. She's also a renowned TV presenter and investigative reporter, and an adjunct professor of advanced communication and visual storytelling at the University of Southern California. Today, I'd like to discuss with Natalie the recent developments and outlook for the cryptocurrency markets. Hello, Natalie. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
For sure. So you say that Bitcoin is the most important digital asset. Why is that the case in your view? What makes you so excited about Bitcoin?
Yes, I do feel that way. Bitcoin is the future of money. We need a better money. We have a financial system that's completely broken. And I say that because it is not accessible to many people around the world. And in developed nations and in the West, it is a system that gives most of the advantage to the people at the top at the expense of everybody else. And that's not a system that's fair. And that's not a system that creates the most productivity and abundance for the most amount of people. It's one that feels almost like a rigged system for many people at this point. We have a declining middle class. We have the cost of living going up and people feeling like their wages are not keeping up. And we feel a sense of frustration, right? So the money is broken. I think a lot of people acknowledge that, but they don't really know how or why it's broken or what could fix it. And Bitcoin is the best engineered money that's ever been invented. It is divisible. It is portable. It is scarce. It is decentralized. It is the most powerful technology network that we really have. It's ingenious how it was invented and how it took off and achieved the network effect that it has. And so I'm very passionate about educating people about Bitcoin and really about the current monetary system and the properties, because once you shine a spotlight on our current system and what it's done to people over the last many, many decades, people start to say, okay, I acknowledge the fact that there's a problem. What are the proposed solutions? And ultimately, they generally arrive at the same conclusion as me, which is that Bitcoin fixes this.
All right, great. I'm going to agree with you on so many points here. First, we do have a problem in the financial system globally. So many people, millions, if not billions, do not even have a bank account and do not have access to much needed services that would significantly improve their lives, not to mention the many inefficiencies in the global financial system. But I would also argue that Bitcoin has its own inefficiencies as well. Transactions are still very slow. And I would also argue that at the current price, not so many people would have access to Bitcoin and not so many businesses accept the currency. So what would you say to that?
We are at the starting point of a technology network that's going to capture billions of people. So I equate it very much so to the early days of the internet in the 90s, where I don't believe people saw the true potential and saw how transformative the internet would be in terms of the way that we communicate and the way that we conduct commerce. So we are in those early days of Bitcoin as well, as far as monetizing and going from, something speculative to a store of value to a medium of exchange to a unit of account, which is generally that process of monetization. And so I think that, it's really exciting to see that over 14 years, not only has the network proven itself, it has been ticking as expected and providing Bitcoin on the schedule that it was programmed with no fraud, no hacks, and has captured already millions and millions of people who have been able to store their value in the best performing asset of the last decade. Yes, it's volatile. Yes, it has bear markets and it has choppy sideways motions like it has right now. But over the long run, when you zoom out, our purchasing power of any fiat currency is declining, some declining much faster than others, whereas Bitcoin is over time going up and up. I think it's really powerful as a tool because of what you mentioned. There are billions of people around the world who have no access to banking. And it's interesting that you mentioned, the slow part, because right now I could send you $1 billion for just a couple of pennies on the Bitcoin network, and it will settle within 10 minutes. Whereas if I tried to send you $1 billion in the traditional legacy system, it would take weeks and weeks to settle. So, you could say it's slow, but there is actually also a purpose and a reason for why that base layer has to be very, very hard and strong, why it's meant to function the way that it is, and why it is slower, and why the block size is what it is, because that ultimately does make the network as powerful, as decentralized, and as strong as it is, and doesn't allow it to concentrate in the hands of a few people. So we're very early, but wow, I can't even imagine the possibilities with this new form, the internet of money, so to speak, of what this could do in the long run.
That's fascinating. I really do hope it provides a very efficient solution and helps people. And you know that central banks are currently developing their own digital currencies. How would this affect Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies at large?
Well, I think that the value proposition for Bitcoin will be even greater once central bank digital currencies proliferate in more countries. Right now, they're being tested and not doing quite well in places in the Caribbean as well as in China, where there are draconian, social credit systems that are being installed. Where essentially, this is a dystopian world where it's a digital dictatorship, where someone can say you can spend your money in this way, or you don't have access to it. They can, deposit in the form of stimulus a certain amount of money that they say you can only spend in certain places, or it expires at a certain point. That's not your money. That is the government's money that they are essentially renting to you. And that's a very scary world, because our money, Bitcoin is a form of property, and I believe strongly in property rights, and the fact that really creates that base layer for society to function and to engage with one another cooperatively. We have to have strong property rights. It's one of the reasons why the U.S. was able, to capture so much power over the last few centuries, is because it was enshrined in our Constitution, this idea of individual sovereignty and property rights. And slowly but surely, the government has eroded and encroached more and more on that, taking over control. And so I worry about how much more control that they will try to take, because once that ball gets rolling, they want to take more and more, and they set a precedent. So Bitcoin allows us to sort of take that power back, because ultimately we have to remember that we, the people, outnumber and are stronger than the few elites that are, pulling all the levers right now, and who have concentrated so much wealth in their own hands. And I know that people are dividing themselves into these two teams. It's red versus blue. It's like us versus them so much, especially when you turn on the news. But the truth is it's really us, the people, and the working class, and the people who are trying to produce value, versus the few amount of people who have taken advantage of an unfair system, and they're trying to maintain their grip on that monopoly. So Bitcoin, I think, provides an opportunity to empower a lot of people economically, and that's a future that, again, I think will create more abundance and productivity when you unleash the ability for people to compete fairly. When the game is essentially rigged so that the people at the top get the first access to money, that is a rigged system where the majority of people are basically left behind. And that's why they feel so frustrated. Whereas a new system where you have to compete for value and you have to take risk, and some of that risk will be rewarded and some of it will be punished and not bailed out, that is a system that will create a lot more value for the most amount of people.
So you believe this system would be more meritocratic, so to speak?
Absolutely. Yes. Bitcoin is meritocratic money. Yes.
Okay, great. And I certainly believe in property rights and their potential to really push forward economic development of all people, not just the people at the top, as you say. And as you know, regulators have been trying hard for a while now to regulate Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. How far have they come now, and what do you think will happen in that regards in the future?
Yes, I think that the latest fallout, the crypto meltdown that we saw over the last year, has strengthened the hand of the people that are in power to say we want to try to rein some of this stuff in. And I see it on both sides. First of all, as far as crypto, many of us in the space have really been warning about these vapor tokens, about companies that sort of emerge. They sometimes copy Bitcoin's protocol, sometimes they adjust it, they pre-mine a bunch of tokens for themselves. I mean, it's like the wild, wild west, like the early internet when there was a bunch of speculation in the 90s as well during the dot-com bubble. Anyone can create a cryptocurrency. That does not mean that it's something of substance and value and utility. So right now what we have is we have Bitcoin, which is a true commodity and is recognized as a form of property and as a commodity by all the regulators, including the SEC and the powers that be. And then we have everything else, which is a giant mix of a bunch of question marks. Some of them are pure outright scams where people are trying to rug pull others. And then some of them are people who I think are genuinely working to create innovation, but they haven't looked too far or far enough rather into the future to solve for problems like decentralization, scalability, and scalability, decentralization, and I'm dropping the last prong of the triangle, but scarcity. So eventually you have to introduce either more governance or you have a system where you can essentially issue as many tokens as you want, like Sam Bankman-Fried did. He issued as many FTT tokens as he saw fit, and then he actually used that counterfeit money as collateral to take out loans, like real money, and took people's real Bitcoin that they deposited with him to go on a joyride and spend on politician donations and all of that. So that's a system that should actually maybe be reined in, because we have the stock market, right, which is regulated, and those companies have to file disclosures. They have massive accounting and legal teams who let investors know, hey, this is how the system works. This is how the leadership structure works. This is what our plans are as far as the company. Here's what we're making and how. Then you have this wild, wild west where people are issuing tokens and people are investing them, not knowing who's in control, how many tokens there will be released, how many the owners or the foundation that started it is keeping themselves. That's a system that's very opaque and dangerous to invest in. You're essentially going to a casino and you are gambling, and we advise people against it. Whereas Bitcoin, very, very different. Commodity, you can take custody of it yourself, asset with no issuer. So I still urge people to be very careful where they're buying and custodying their Bitcoin, but it's two different worlds that, I think right now regulators are trying to come in and sort of provide some clarity and hopefully a framework and a roadmap so that companies can be honest and say, yes, this is a digital security. This is how you invest. We're going to properly register and all of that. We don't have a stock market that's unregulated and just a free for all. And in digital equities, I don't think we should have that as well, where people are essentially losing money and not knowing what the heck they're investing in. So I'm not bearish on regulation because of what's already been revealed about Bitcoin versus crypto. The thing I'm more worried about is this idea that the central government is just going to try to tax people, and they're going to say, Bitcoiners now owe however much percentage of capital gains tax, because they're trying to encroach and take when they can't balance their budget. They're not, they're spending too much, and they're drawing they're using their Visa to pay their MasterCard, and it's just complete poor financial mismanagement. And Bitcoiners and other innovators, entrepreneurs should not be punished for the bad risk taking and the bad management of central authorities like governments.
I completely agree. And I certainly hope regulation would bring the best benefits that Bitcoin has to offer. But let's talk a bit about the price. You know that Bitcoin lost a lot of value in 2022. Recently, this year, it has recovered some ground with probably some less hawkish tone from the Fed. But I think it has also dropped a bit recently after Jerome Powell again struck a more hawkish tone. So what is your outlook?
I think that the next 6 to 12 months will be choppy. It has a lot of macro headwinds that it's facing. A lot of people just purely do not understand Bitcoin. People are wary to invest in this type of market. We're, in the midst of a bear market. The economy is decelerating. Lagging indicators are starting to show across many, many different sectors. And so obviously people are feeling more fear than greed right now, which is understandable. There are institutions that, don't have the proper avenues to invest. We don't have a spot Bitcoin ETF. For a while, until the FASB recently made an announcement, you couldn't mark to market. I mean, it's just been a very difficult space for large investment, entities and pension funds to actually invest in Bitcoin. And we also, again, had this crypto market on the side, this speculative bubble that I think distracted people, and people started to funnel their money in that place, thinking that they would become, overnight millionaires and be able to retire. So a lot of headwinds that I think will continue. Right now, I think the big question on everyone's mind is how bad this recession will be. How bad will the not so soft landing be? And when you draw it out far enough, I don't know if it's going to be 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 2 years from now. At some point, unfortunately, because of the amount of debt we're in, we will have to pivot when there is treasury dysfunction, or when things have gotten bad enough and we are starting to careen toward a depression or a deflationary bust. They have to step in and print. And that's what's really sad is, Jerome Powell was on TV basically admitting this. We are solving our debt by issuing more debt. That's not a real solution, right? We're just debasing our currency further. And so before, most of the stimulus and most of the monetary manipulation happened on the bank lending side through quantitative easing. Now I think it's going to shift more to the fiscal side. We are running massive fiscal deficits that are injecting more liquidity into the system. And I think that there will be more because people will be crying out for help. They'll be wanting more stimulus and helicopter money. And so this is a system where, again, they're flooding the whole economy with more units, more dollars. And that means each dollar is worth less. So that's why you see more things continue to get more expensive. Couple that with commodity issues and shortages and the war in Ukraine. We've got a massive problem that they're going to try to print their way out of, but it's important for people to hold real assets. So I think Bitcoin will eventually, win once people turn their head over to that other side and try to purchase more commodities or more precious metals and more hard assets. And I think that Bitcoin will start to capture more and more of the asset classes, because bonds and stocks right now, especially certain stocks, they're moving in the other direction. So I think choppiness ahead. Not sure what the price will do, but we also have a halving coming up in May of next year, or April, maybe the date might have changed. So that's usually, that supply shock is usually associated with a climb in price. But I'm not sure when we might hit the prior all-time highs. But in the long run, they have to print, and in the long run, Bitcoin I think will go up.
It is indeed a dysfunctional system, as you say, which is very unfortunate. My final question, are there any particular events in the near future that will fundamentally impact Bitcoin and crypto and the overall?
Events. I mean, right now it's just they're trying to tackle inflation. I think that we're about to see another maybe it'll be 50 basis points. I'm not sure increase, and sectors are starting to unwind. I was just speaking to a friend who works in real estate. I mean, the real estate sector is already in recession here in the U.S. We are seeing problems at the auto loan level. We are seeing commercial real estate. I mean, people are not re-signing those leases. We're going to have a bunch of empty buildings. We're seeing a lot of problems that take a while to move into the system. Plus, we've had so much cash just sloshing around because they injected so much liquidity at once, and then they tightened so quickly all at once that some of it, it's a lagging indicator, but it's all going again in that same direction where eventually things will start to decline, probably faster than the Fed is hoping for. And it may come all at once in the same way that, you can take a few shots and all of a sudden, once that kicks in, you're on the floor. And I think that's what's going to happen essentially to our economy. And the only way that they can stop that and reverse it is to print. And that moves us in the direction of more inflation. Again, I think we've entered a structurally more inflationary time period, maybe decade. I think that commodities will outperform the tech stocks, and I think that Bitcoin, being a commodity as well as a technology network, is going to see a heightened recognition of what it offers, especially in the sense that it is not only a growing decentralized diffuse technology network, but it's also a hard asset that cannot be manipulated or inflated. That scarcity is going to be more important as people try to put their money in a place where they can protect the value of it into the future. So I think that in the next couple of months, the next couple of years, it's going to be really interesting. But I guess the event everyone's waiting for is when the Fed will pivot and what's going to happen and shake out with the Ukraine war as well.
It's really interesting that you're saying that inflation has, in a way, become entrenched and that it will take a while for us to see some improvements. And that might very well be the case. And so investors need to take note and hedge their assets, for sure.
People are not used to investing in this type of inflationary environment. I mean, most people who are working as investment managers or portfolio managers have not invested in, say, the 70s, which was a very different time, especially when it comes to, debt to GDP. Our debt levels are just through the roof. And so this is a very, very difficult time to navigate, adding on top of that, what's happening on a global level with currency shifts, the BRICS system that's emerging, countries basically saying they're going to reshore, their commodities. And we're putting ourselves in a precarious situation because we don't have the political will to tap into some of our energy abilities here in the U.S. And so a lot to watch for. And I think fiscal stimulus, fiscal deficits will continue to increase as people call out for help and call out for money, which only puts us in a worse situation, right? We're sort of in this debt spiral, this debt doom loop. And I really urge people to, focus on things that are hard, things that are difficult to inflate. I'm not the biggest gold bug because I believe that technology and the digital economy is the future. So I'm a proponent of Bitcoin, which is often equated as digital gold, but I understand why people are also investing in the precious metals, in the commodities sector, all of that. So really interesting time ahead, really interesting time to watch everything that's happening. And I hope more people pay attention just because it's like people recognize that there's something wrong. And I think sometimes they point the blame in the wrong place or they make it political when it's really not. The problem is our economy is fundamentally broken and we do have a chance to sort of fix it in a digital world where we're all connected online.
Interesting times indeed, and a very interesting perspective from you, Natalie Brunell, the host of Coin Stories podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights. We look forward to welcoming you again on this show.
Thank you so much for having me.
For sure.